Okay, these are your notes on the Empire of Rome, Part 1, Legacies of the Pax Romana. Before you watch these notes, please click on the link in the video description to the What Have the Romans Done for Us video. Watch that and write down. You should have almost 10 things that this rebel group says that the Romans have done for them. So take notes on that video, and then come back to this one to take the rest of your notes. So this was called a great empire. Why was this empire so great? Number one, it was huge. It went from the Middle East all the way to Western Europe. It went up to Britain. It went to the Mediterranean Sea and North Africa and Egypt. And it was all one, and it was all held together by one person. And that person was Augustus. Along with his military, he made sure this was one big, unified empire. Also, he created public works, art flourished, there was religion and literature and great rulers and roads and aqueducts, we'll talk about what those are in a minute, games, gladiators, and something called the Pax Romana. So what was the Pax Romana? There's lots of ways that we can look at what this term means. Literally, it is the Latin term that means Roman peace. From a practical perspective, it meant that Roman citizens could go anywhere in Rome without being bothered by people. So if you were a Roman citizen, you could travel from one side of the empire to the other, and you would be safe the whole entire way. The result of this was that there were very harsh punishments for breaking the rules. If you want to enforce peace throughout an entire empire and you really want to make sure people follow the rules, you need very harsh punishments. And we've seen that before with Hammurabi. We've seen it with legalism in China. Very harsh punishments are a disincentive. They make people not want to break the rules. So what happened during this period? What did the Pax Romana do for people, and what was going on during the period it existed? This is 2 centuries of peace and prosperity for Rome. Nobody messes with Rome for about 200 years. Why? Because Rome would crush you if you tried. Having the Pax Romana helped stabilize imperial rule. That meant that people weren't fighting back against the emperors, that they were stable. They expanded and solidified the Roman Empire, especially in the Near East, which is the part of the world today that is Turkey and Syria and Lebanon and Israel and Jordan, that part of the world. How did it help economics? During this period of time, Rome was a pretty rich empire. Why? Because it had a uniform system of money. Money was the same in every single place in the Roman Empire. If you have the same money in North Africa as you do in Britain, it is easy to trade with other people, and your trade can expand very quickly. There was safe travel and trade guaranteed for Roman citizens on Roman roads. Why? Because there were people monitoring the roads, and because the punishments were so bad, you weren't going to break the rules. There was prosperity and stability as a result of these roads that were safe and having a uniform system of money. How did the Pax Romana change people's social lives? It brought back stability to the social classes. Remember, there was a civil war, and the plebeians had backed Caesar, and the patricians were unhappy about what was going on. Augustus settled everything down. Social classes were stable again. The plebeians were happy being plebeians, I guess. The patricians were happy with their situation. And there was an increased emphasis on family. Augustus even called himself the father of Rome because he thought that families were the most important thing for holding together the empire. What about politics in the Pax Romana? Augustus created a civil service. Remember, a civil service is where you go and work for the government. Remember, China had a civil service exam to see what job in the government you were suited for. And we have the same thing for our foreign service. If you want to work in an embassy abroad, you take an exam. There was uniform rule of law. Laws were the same everywhere, which means you know what the law is. And if you break it, you know what the consequences are. All these things, the civil service and the uniform rule of law and having the same currency and having good roads, helped hold the empire together after Augustus died. One mistake he did make was that he forgot to create a method for having a peaceful way to decide who came next and who was going to be the next emperor. So there was a lot of fighting about it. And because the government was in place and could kind of run itself, it wasn't as big a deal as it would have been if those things hadn't been taken care of. Okay, this is a huge empire with a lot of people, and we have to make sure that the people in this empire are happy, that they're taken care of, that they have jobs, because otherwise they're going to want to rebel. So how did the emperors do that? To keep the people happy, they gave away a lot of food. Okay, they gave away bread and grain to the people. They provided a lot of entertainment, and those were often called circuses or gladiator fights, okay? And we refer to the bread and circus of Rome, or bread and circuses, and that refers to the free food and entertainment that the Roman leaders provided. So, the most popular form of entertainment was gladiators. Gladiators were specially trained slaves. They either fought with each other or some were specially trained to fight wild animals. And Romans loved a good fight, and they loved to watch these gladiators fight animals. They had to import animals from Africa because they ran out of animals in Italy to fight. This is the Colosseum. This is probably the most famous place where Roman entertainment happened. It's right in the center of Rome. Off to the side, you can kind of see peeking out some of the buildings of the Roman Forum, the public gathering place. So these were huge, huge stadiums. One of my college professors always said that stadium technology has not changed much. This is basically exactly the same as a stadium that you would go to today. Here's the inside of the Colosseum. These support structures are where the seats would have been at the time. If you were a poor plebeian, you might sit up at the top here. If you were rich, a patrician, you would sit in these lower areas, and this would be the arena itself. Underneath here is where they would have kept the animals, or where the gladiators would have hung out while they were waiting for their turn to fight. Occasionally, for like really special occasions, they would flood this area and reenact naval battles for people's entertainment. Here's some people. You can see how small they are. The other big kind of entertainment sport that they had were races. They loved chariot races and foot races, and those would take place in a place called the circus. And the most famous of the circuses is the Circus Maximus, which was located in Rome, sort of off to the other side of the Forum from the Colosseum. So they would race around this track, around and around and around. We have monuments to the winners or to the emperors in the center. What other things did they do to keep people happy? They built really amazing buildings, and having these wonderful modern buildings in their city made people feel really proud of being Roman. And the more buildings you build, the more people you have to hire to build them, so the more jobs you have and the more people are employed. People like to have jobs. So this is the Forum. This is where if you wanted to build a temple, if you wanted to build a building to show your honor for an emperor, you would build it here. This is a temple to Saturn. Only part of it is still standing. Down here below, we have an arch, and sometimes if there wasn't enough space or money, you might build just an arch to commemorate someone, and you would cover it with carvings called friezes that would tell how great that person was and all the wonderful things that they had done. There were baths, public baths in the Forum where people would go and hang out and clean themselves and work out. There were gyms there. They had hot and cold baths, and this was like a public gathering spot where people would go to find their friends and talk politics. And then we have the Pantheon. The Pantheon was built by a guy named Agrippa. There's his name. And it is a visual trick. If you walk up the Pantheon from the front of it here, it looks like it's going to be a square building. But you can see that in the back it is round. So when you walk inside, this is what you see. You see this dome, which was one of the biggest domes in existence at the time. It might have been the biggest. And it's interesting because it has this hole in the center. And all the weight of the dome is centering itself around this hole. And when you're inside, you can see what the weather is outside. And when I was there, it was snowing, which was pretty cool. There was snow and some like light mist coming down. Around the edges are these carved out areas called niches with statues of all of the Roman gods. And look at all these people down here. You can see how huge this building is and how impressed people must have been to go into it back in the Roman times. Okay, what else did they do to keep people happy? They built roads. Having good roads made it easier to travel and easier to trade, so people can go places and they can make money more easily. They also built aqueducts. Having aqueducts brought water to your city if you weren't near a source of water, because remember, this is a huge empire. Not everybody lives in Rome. Some people live in other remote places. And everybody in public spaces had running water. The baths, the public baths had running water. There were public toilets. I'll watch a video in class about the public toilets that people used. Pretty crazy. Here is the Appian Way, the most famous Roman road. And the saying, all roads lead to Rome, comes initially from the Appian Way and then other roads, but all of them literally do eventually lead back to the Forum in Rome. And this is how it would have been paved at the time. You can see it's still being used as a road. And you can see the grooves from the wheels of carts going over these stones many times over the years. Here's what an aqueduct looks like. An aqueduct is bringing water, and the only place the water is along the very top, sitting in the top, open to the air. There's a stream of water that's being carried from some water source to somewhere where water is needed. And some of these aqueducts were miles, like hundreds of miles long. Having this arch, the Roman arch, is what allowed them to build these, because otherwise you would have to build walls. They wouldn't be as strong, and they would require a lot more building material. All right, that is it for your Roman Empire Part 1 Pax Romana notes. Make sure that you watch the other video and be ready for your quiz in class next time.